Hi guys, and welcome to this week's episode of Behind the Frame. I did something slightly different this week and shared 3 images with you all on my Instagram account. If you don't follow me on Instagram, go through, check it out. But I asked which of the 3 images you would like to see edited this week. And the first one was of a hippo bull. The second was of 2 palm trees photographed in Botswana with a night sky. And the third image was of a leopard against a beautiful background with the riverbank. And I just want to thank everyone for their comments and feedback on Instagram. What I've decided to do, because the votes were fairly well split across all 3 images, is I'm actually going to use those 3 images over the next couple of weeks. So starting off with this hippo bull, which as you can see here, is the raw image, photographed at 1/400th of a second, f3.2, ISO 4000. So this was taken in the Timbavati game reserve here in South Africa, and it's, again, South Africa is one of those destinations where we are able to do night drives, and with the aid of the ethical use of a spotlight, we're able to drive through the bush at night and see some of the nocturnal animals. Now, hippos often come out of the water at night to go and feed. This was the start of the dry season. We came across this big guy, and at 300 mils, didn't really have too much room to be able to pull back, but immediately what struck me was the potential for a scene which had a slightly more unusual composition. So I'll show you why I shot this particular frame the way I did in a bit. But just talking about settings for nighttime photography, obviously very, very low light, so aperture just about wide open at f3.2. Shutter speed at 400th of a second, which is actually pretty decent given that the focal length was 300 mils. And in order to make the whole thing work, we needed an ISO value of 4000. So from a metering perspective here, this would have been at spot metering off of the brightest part, which is over here, or underexposing. And so in this particular instance, if we have a look at some of the metadata here, I'm almost certain that I would have gone back, whoops, we click on Lightroom, I would have underexposed because I'm shooting in manual mode here with auto ISO. So let's just have a quick look. I'll pull down over here. No, full manual, no exposure compensation. So there you go. Reminding myself of some of these settings here. So moving on to the composition. Why on earth would I have shot this frame like this? I've clipped off some of the mouth over here. It feels like an awkward frame. And immediately in my mind, I had something slightly different envisaged. So I'm going to use a ratio of 16:9. So what that does is it kind of emphasizes the width of the scene. So if you have a look here, if we start to pull in this top corner, what I had in mind was something along these lines, with an extreme kind of, half of the face on one side and then a lot of negative space left to the other side. So that is kind of where I would like to be. Why I haven't included more of the mouth here, I find it's a little bit more distracting. So we found this point just over the actual lip line over there to be best. And in order to get this kind of straight down, I'm going to just straighten up just a little bit over here. And that now looks a little bit better from a composition point of view. So the important thing here is that if you'd just seen this image as the full image and you just kind of shot, you may have looked at it and just I've clipped his mouth, and you move on to the next thing. And this is where shooting with intent is so important. So I'd already envisaged the scene that I wanted to create here. And now coming back after the fact into Lightroom, I'm able to crop to what I see as my final story. So that's the final image. That's what we want. It's a slightly different take on a scene. It is most definitely a hippo, but it's not your stock standard full frame fat hippo image. So that's that. The crop is the most important thing here, and I want you guys to just realize and remember that shooting with intent and for your final composition in mind is vitally important. So taking us to the next step here, we're going to start to look at some of the editing. I would like to do this in black and white, so I've immediately hit the shortcut key, which is V, to make this in black and white. And if you have a look at the histogram here, we've got plenty of room to kind of stretch out some of the whites on this side of things. You see that it's starting to have a big impact here. I'm not going to do too much more over there now. I'm going to lift the clarity on a global scale here, just to get a little bit more punch and detail in there, and even a bit of dehaze filter, which is kind of that edge contrast and clarity as well. Then coming through into the tone curve, I'm going to lift the lights, and bring those up a little bit. You'll see that these areas here start to pop quite a bit. And then on the shadows, just going to drop those down a hint, and the same on the darks. If you look at your black and white mix in terms of the colors that we have here, if we take this back into color, you see a lot of oranges and maybe a little bit of pinks and oranges and yellows coming through here. So if we swing our slider, you see that we start to have an impact on those. We don't want them to become too bright, but they certainly are a part of the image that we want to kind of come through. The yellows, maybe a little bit more on this side of the face. So that's starting to look quite nice. Our detail panel, we want to use our sharpening masking. So this is the area that we kind of want to get an idea of. So let's use the eye as an example. And I'm going to mask out, having a look. Definitely this right hand side is more where the detail is that we want. So we're going to take that up to there and maybe just lift that sharpening, be quite aggressive on this and on the radius because it's such a full frame sort of image. We've hardly cropped out on those pixels. Now there's two localized adjustments that I want to work through with you guys on here. The first one is obviously around this eye. So we really want the eye to pop. We've got some very bright areas on the skin here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go in with a brush, a localized adjustment brush, and we're just going to work this eye section here. We hit O for overlay so we can see what we're doing. And you'll see that we're just going to work the actual eye itself as well as this white area. Take the overlay off, and now we're going to apply the adjustment. So let's just take that up quite extreme by half a stop on there. But what you'll find is now that that eye is going to hold quite a bit more presence. So let's have a look at it with and without that adjustment. So we switch off. Look at the difference there. So it's not unnatural, but it certainly does bring your attention towards the eye a little bit more. The other thing that I want to do is use the graduated filter. Now, this is something that so few people actually think about doing. Now, if you look at the visual energy in this frame, we want people to be focused and drawn to this part here. And the way that we can do that, we've already got brighter elements in the frame. So the eye, the ear, this little part here, and the nostril. And we don't want people to drift over this side. So we want to make this area a little bit darker to push people across this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my graduated filter and I'm going to go from left to right. If you have a look here, remember that the red area shows us the part of the image that we're affecting. I'm going to switch off the overlay, and all I want to do in this side of things is maybe drop the blacks a little bit more. And I think that should do the trick. Maybe just a hint of exposure, drop that down a touch. So if you have a look at before and after. So what you're going to find there is that this side, this left-hand side of the frame is now slightly darker. And if you have a look at the visual energy, it's now pushing you across to this area here. Looking at it now, maybe what we can do as well is just go in with a little bit of a brush on this side. And I'm going to use a large brush so that the effect is kind of spread out over an area. I'm going to use a flow of 3, so it's quite a soft adjustment. And we're slowly going to start to build up the effect. So if we have a look at our overlay, we're going to then brush just this section over here, and you'll see that there is a bit of a natural kind of dark element to this part of the frame. And all we're going to do is, just in an effort to try and keep the viewer's eye into the areas that we really want them to have a look at, all we're going to do over here is we're going to drop the exposure a little bit. So watch the adjustment as it's applied. So just dropping that by about a third over there. So again, nothing that looks unnatural, but watch the difference here. So we're looking at the eye and that section of the face. So that's without those adjustments, that's with. So we dialed this part down, making it darker, lifted the exposure of the eye here, and then with the graduated filter, we darkened this side of the frame, pushing the viewer across to that side. And I think that is about as much as I would like to do to this image. So couple of lessons in this one. The first thing is that you need to have an idea of what you're trying to achieve with your final image. And you need to think out of the box, try different compositions, and shoot for that. Don't just shoot and look at it afterwards and say, what could I do here? Shooting with intent is probably one of the best ways to improve your photography. So I'd already envisaged this image in my mind, and I shot for that, knowing how I was going to process it and crop it after the fact in Lightroom. I hope you guys have enjoyed this week's episode of Behind the Frame. As always, if you have any questions or comments, drop me an email or just comment on the video or the blog itself. And next week, we'll be looking at the twin palms image of 2 stars with the night skies in the background. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of the details on that image with you guys. For me, that's it for this week. Cheers.